Hello and welcome everyone. I'm very happy and pleased to be here with you all. Some of you, hopefully, I know and recognize, along with some of the other folks on the call from maybe Power Platform Conference or the community, or maybe we have interacted with you directly at your organizations. With me today, those folks, whenever they do speak, will introduce themselves. I'll keep it really informal right now. So again, I'm Ken. With me, I have Mick. He's on camera. He'll probably wave. We also have Sid, and we have Wendy. Small, short, quick thing about me. Yes, I am a product manager. I own, along with Mick, a number of features, including like things for governance and security, DLP. We have other PMs that own things like environment routing, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And I was also a former customer, so along with some of our other folks who are on the call. So not only have we now taken the leap into the factory, if you will, but we know the pains very, very well. So with that, please feel free to know that the chat is open. We are looking and watching the chats. So if you have questions, please recognize that we are, again, looking at the chats, and feel free to ask your questions. And we may call on you and ask you to come on mic and elaborate more and so on. With that, let's jump right in and talk about enterprise scale, give you a quick, short recap of some of the things that we have within the platform today. And then we're going to talk about, like, what does that look like? How do you use those things? Like establishing your security baseline, looking at using governance to unlock innovation, enhancing your integration, and even later, Sid's going to talk about monitoring, verifying, and being a little bit more proactive. And then more importantly, once you've done all these things, how the heck do you support all of that, right? Wendy's going to come in and talk to us about how to support the platform once you have unlocked this juggernaut and are injecting innovation into your organization. But first, how many of you like puppies? You can raise your hand in the chat. You can give a thumbs up inside of there, right? Puppies are great. Like, I absolutely love them. If you don't like puppies, you might be able to equate it to a little bit like kittens, but puppies are absolutely phenomenal. But that's when you have one puppy. But maybe you have 5 puppies. Okay, I can kind of manage that just a little bit. But then I go to the dog park and now I have, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40 puppies, right? And then somehow AI gets involved and now I have a million puppies with 3 eyes and I don't exactly know how to handle them, how to manage them, or anything at all. Your Power Platform environments can sometimes be like this, right? We have an enormous amount of features and settings and all of these things where, yes, you have one single administrator that's just over this whole cloud of settings, and like, it's confusing, it's overwhelming. What do we do? So what we would like to do is, instead of having things trying to be managed as puppies, let's look at, say, managing things more like sheep, whereby Power Platform Administrator becomes more of a shepherd. The sheep follow the good shepherd, as we know, and just sort of go along with that lead sheep, right? That's following the shepherd. So here's the analogy. A lot of things are built by hand and so on inside of there. You're spending a lot of time doing ad hoc processes. You're just constantly firefighting inside of your governance. What we're proposing, or what we're going to talk about today, is how to be more proactive, how to be informed, how to get ahead of the curve, and how to effectively manage your platform so that it helps you move from personal productivity and cross that chasm into enterprise mode, right? Full on enterprise governance, right? So that now you have this bridge. Well, instead of doing things like having a manual process for having application lifecycle management, You have full end product application lifecycle management. You have proactive governance instead of firefighting. And you can also utilize some of the full potential of artificial intelligence, even within the administrative space. So with that, jumping right in, I said we would start with a quick sort of recap of all the things that we have within the platform. Well, I won't go super deep inside of that because it is extremely important to establish a security baseline. But as I mentioned, there's a lot. These are just a small list of some of the features that we have within the platform. And some of these things you may know, like for example, show of hands, how many of you have heard of DLP? So you can do thumbs up, again, hands, and so on, right? So it seems like a good bit of you. Now, I'm talking about DLP in the context of Power Platform, right? So the argument from some customers is that, hey, your DLP really isn't DLP at all. It's not. So it's something else, right? Know that we're working on that, and Mick's going to share some information with you a little bit later that will really thrill and surprise you. With that said, we also have features like tenant isolation. Tenant isolation is an absolute wonderful feature. I encourage you all, if you're not using tenant isolation today, turn tenant isolation on. Ken, what does tenant isolation do? Right? And where is it on this chart? Tenant isolation is right here, folks. Down here at the bottom left. So what tenant isolation will do is, as the name implies, is it isolates your tenant. So now I can control data moving from, say, one tenant to another, right, through these particular policies. So for example, if Mick works for Contoso and I work for Woodgrove Bank, I can either deny or allow communication between those two tenants so that I can do maybe collaboration or maybe even say guest access and so on, right, through that particular policy. Again, marvelously wonderful feature. Now, moving on a little bit. I should have asked this maybe right at the beginning. How many of you today are new to the platform and just here to gather some information? So again, quick show of hands. That's pretty good. I see about 7 or so folks inside of there. This session is absolutely still for you, 9 now, not a problem. Happy to have you, and you will get some valuable information inside of here. Now, for those of you who may be more seasoned veterans, I have a very important question for you. How do you feel about the default environment? And please feel free to put in emojis or anything else that you'd like to put inside of there that probably express disgust and other shock and so on and so forth, just like we're seeing coming across the screen right now, right? So I'm happy to say that we are absolutely hearing you and doing something about this, right? So without further ado, let's talk about how to govern things and move away from the default environment and be more proactive, starting with environment routing. So environment routing is a brand new feature that we have within the platform, right? That our strategy is moving towards. So a lot of what you know today in terms of managing the platform and managing your assets within the default environment itself, that's going to be really changing, especially this year. So environment routing is a wonderful feature that allows for the administrator to take control and, as the name implies, route folks away from the default. So I'll use this analogy. If you're familiar with SharePoint Online versus OneDrive, they both use the same underlying technology, but SharePoint sites are for the masses, the we, right? But OneDrive is for the individual, for the me scenarios. So we're looking at this initially in that same aspect, whereby now what we allow you to do, again, from the administrator side of things, totally under the administrator's control, once this feature is enabled, it will now route makers from the default into their own personal environments, their own personal developer environments. So why is this important? It's important because one, now these assets have a centralized place to live that's dedicated to their personal productivity space and their work. You can still do shared development, which we'll talk about in just a bit, and move applications and flows and whatnot around. You can do all of those things. But now we're giving them a dedicated, secure environment. So how are you doing security inside of that? How is that going to happen? And now how am I going to be able to be more proactive, Ken? Mick, again, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I wanted to also share with you, not many folks have seen this. In fact, if you're not on this call, you probably have not seen this publicly. So today, you do not have the ability to expand environment routing features. And what I mean by that is you can simply turn on the feature and it simply starts doing the routing to the individual groups, which is good in itself. But we said that's not good enough. So what we decided to do was, again, listening to you, we have now enhanced those particular features. So coming very, very soon, again, Mick will give you some timelines in just a moment. You can now use something that Mick's going to talk about after I stop running my mouth, called environment groups. So environment groups think about them as logical containers, right? So I can now group my environments together inside of that and drop all my environments inside of there. That sounds cool, Ken, but there has to be more to it. Yes, there absolutely is. Again, I keep saying his name. Mick will talk about that more in just a second. But you can also now use routing with security groups. So I can say, for example, hey, I only want the folks in HR to be routed, or these particular folks that have these licenses, and so on. So now you can have a targeted group of who you wish to route within the platform itself. Now, instead of hogging on the limelight, let's let Mick talk about how you can be more proactive with our upcoming shift in strategy. Over to you, Mick.
Sure thing. Thank you, Ken. I'm just going to take control of the slide. So it's nice to meet everybody on the call. I am also a product manager like Ken, also in the same team, been working on all sorts of capabilities that relate to governance for a few years now. It's great to see you all. We're going to talk about the environment groups, but just before that, this slide over here is a little bit of a repeat of the pet versus cattle story that Ken was talking about beforehand. And it seems like we do have a pretty wide variety of customers on the call. Some of you that are pretty early in your journey, right now, life seems good, right? There's probably, just a handful of assets that you know about, certain apps that are quite popular. But the Power Platform certainly has a lot of pull, and it's quite popular for a reason. And we do see a lot of customers find themselves in a situation where there's just simply way too many things to handle, not just at like a particular resource level, but there's a lot of environments as well. And over time, it becomes very difficult to manage. And some folks might recognize this kind of looks like one of the bugs in one of the old Microsoft OS back in the day. But typically the issue today, especially as customers start adopting the platform and have a lot of environments, is that each one of these have to be managed individually for most of the capabilities that we provide. So we do have this capability that's called sharing limit provided with managed environments. If you want to set that up across the board, well, unfortunately, you have to go either click that button across the admin center hundreds of times, or you have to find some way to build the script yourself. Yes, exactly. It's the solitaire one. Good. So it's looking a little bit like this. And we think that there is certainly a better approach that we can provide to all of you on the call, and it's that of the environment groups. So what that essentially helps you do is to actually start governing, pockets of assets in bulk as opposed to individually. And, the feedback we've gotten from customers is that you can even think about these groups in many different ways. what's on the slide is just one example where you can think about even modeling your organization with these groups. So in this example, we can think of, perhaps one group of environments that is dedicated to a particular department, let's say finance, and since they're dealing with more sensitive business data, well, in their case, guests won't be allowed. In their case, sharing will be a little bit more limited, so on and so forth. Whereas another pocket of the organization may be able to have a little bit different set of capabilities. So think of it as a folder for your environments, and that's going to help you sort of navigate probably the hundreds, if not of thousands, of environments that you have today. And what's most important is that it's not about just creating the folder, right? The idea is that you can actually apply all sorts of things to those environments in bulk. And that's where the keyword rule comes in. So what you'll be able to do, and I'll show it in the slide right away, is you'll be able to actually apply all sorts of things to those environments. We'll have a wide variety of rules at your disposal for now. So it's going to be public preview on April 4th. So some of you are going to start seeing it as it kind of gets progressively rolled out. But at that date, all of you are going to see this new page in the admin center. And it's going to start helping you organize your environment estate a little bit more, and hopefully a little bit more efficiently. So the last thing that I'll just emphasize is that this works quite well with the new routing that Ken talked about. One of the concerns that sometimes we hear is that, okay, the default is definitely a difficult thing to govern because everybody's in the same place at the same time. If we were to turn on that routing button, obviously that could result in an even bigger increase of environments that you have to manage now. So one option that we're offering as part of this is all of those new personal developer environments that are being created for each one of those users. Our recommendation is to put all of those into a single group, right? And in that single group, you can effectively set up all sorts of things within there via the rules so that all of those environments are essentially pre-configured without you kind of having to do that after the fact. And one of these, it's not available just yet, but I did see it in one of the comments in the chat. If we can configure the DLP policies on it, that is a capability that we're going to offer as well. So previously, anytime you create an environment, it's they all follow this standard empty template, and then you have to add on to it certain controls after the fact. What this allows you to do, you turn on that routing button, all those environments get created and pre-configured with all of those rules, and they're all contained within that single group so that you can make changes in bulk for those environments. One of those things that you can set up today, and you're going to see it when you get that environment groups page in the admin center, is the maker onboarding. So this is a pretty compelling thing that we would suggest you set up so that if people do get these new personal developer environments and they're just getting started, this is a great way for you to communicate to those users effectively how to get started with the platform. And this guidance is obviously tailored to your organization. Then there's other things like sharing limits that I won't go in too deeply, but also pipelines at some point is going to be supported as a rule so that once makers effectively have done their personal productivity or they found an interesting use case within one of those developer environments, they'll have the opportunity to be able to deploy that in other environments where it may be a little bit more appropriate to share things very broadly. So all of this is part of the suite of features that we are providing as part of managed environments. There is a huge list. This is a mix of some of the security baseline things that Ken talked about, even these new capabilities like the groups and the routing. So definitely, if you want to check it out, we do have some guidance for you to look into it. And obviously, it's accessible through the admin center today if you want to check it out for yourself. So with that, I think, Ken, we'll pass it on to you. Is that correct?
I believe so, my good friend.
All right.
Now, giving a masterclass in such a short amount of time for us is extremely hard because we have so many things within the platform itself, which now I'm trying to take over my presentation and it's not clicking for me, Nick. So let's try that. Is it moving forward now?
Just try, you should be able to take control. There's that button in Teams.
Yeah, I did. It's telling
Oh,
me
yeah.
that. Hold on a second. I'm clicking it again. There we go. I got it. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you. I guess I had a small hiccup on my side. I am in a hotel right now, so everyone forgive me. So let's talk a little bit about how AI and Copilot can actually help you just be a little bit more proactive. Show of hands. Does anyone know what Cunningham's law is? No. No hands. Cunningham's law, and I'm going to paraphrase, basically states the quickest way to get the right answer is to put perhaps something close to, or maybe even the wrong answer out there, right? So enter deployment notes, along with AI generated app descriptions. So let's talk a little bit about those. I'm going to go in kind of reverse order here. App descriptions are something that you all have asked us for quite some time, right? What they do is if you enable this feature, it will, as the name implies, Copilot will come in and create app descriptions of your resources within the platform. So gone are the days in which you may have had 1,000 applications that you had no idea of what they are, right? AI will simply generate the description to the best of its ability. Now, the owner still has the opportunity, because they own the app itself, the resource, to go back in and say, wait a minute, that description is incorrect. I need to fix that because I'm the human and I know better, right? So they can absolutely override that, right? Hence Cunningham's law. If it's not correct, I'm going to want to fix it, right? In the deployment notes for pipelines, and unfortunately, we don't have super enough time to go into pipelines today, but pipelines now has the ability to generate deployment notes, AI generated deployment notes, right? So you know specifically what's being deployed, how it's being deployed, who deployed it, and so on and so forth, right? Brand new feature, absolutely wonderful. I encourage you all to absolutely try this, right? If you're a avid fan of change management, as I am, then this one right here is, I highly encourage you all, please integrate this into your processes. It absolutely is something wonderful. Now, governing things are great. Setting up security is great. But listen, take it from someone who's been through this and has experienced this firsthand. Your policies must be adaptive. They must change. You must constantly be vigilant and learning and listening to the platform. So how do we do that? With us today is also my good friend, Sid. Sid is going to live dangerously, and I believe Sid is going to do a live demo for you and show you how Advisor actually helps you with this. So Sid, if you're here, my friend, over to you. Please present whenever you're ready.
I am ready. Thanks, Ken. Would you mind progressing the slides for me so I don't have to do that swap 2 times?
Say that one more time, Sid.
Would you mind navigating the slides for me initially? I'll take over for the live demo later on.
Sure.
All right, cool. So let me do a quick intro myself as well. So as Mick mentioned earlier, also. So all Mick, Ken, and I are in the same team. Work on similar areas in terms of governance. What I'm going to talk today is about what we call Advisor, Power Platform Advisor. It is public preview since Ignite last year. And to put it into simple terms, Advisor is basically your recommendation service that is going to look into the entire tenant's real estate and based on how you have configured, how you have customized and are using various Power Platform assets, it is going to recommend what are the corrective things? What are the things that needs attention for you at the given time? Okay. This is currently configured to look into managed environments only. So across the tenant, all the managed environments, we're going to look into all of the things that I mentioned earlier. Please go back to one more slide.
Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. So now how we interpret, how we slice the information for you and how we make it easy for you to consume it. Right. So first we have this information, which is standard, right? So these are like the general guidelines or the rules, if you may. Like these are the apps that do not have owners, unused apps or inactive assets in your tenant, and so on and so forth. All of these are informational, but what we do is based on your current configuration usage, we make them as insights for you. Looking into the tenant, we tell how many apps are orphaned or ownerless, how many apps are inactive, or how many apps do not follow best practices in terms of ALM or sharing point of view. And instead of just giving you this insight, we'll also provide you a way to take inline actions. Right. So when you go into Advisor, you can see the information, see the insight, see the recommended actions, and you'll be able to take actions on. Please go to the next slide. We'll see all of this in action in a few seconds. Please go to the next one. Yeah. So you can go to the next one as well. So in addition to taking actions, you can also please go to the next slide as well. Yeah. In addition to taking actions, some of the times you may not be the right person to take action. You may want to consult with somebody in your organization, or you want to delegate it to a maker or somebody else to take action. So what you can do is you can share this recommendation with your colleague who is the right person to take action on. Go to the next slide, please. And for certain cases where you need more research to be done, or it's the simplistic terms of taking a recommendation, action is not immediate, you may be able to create a workflow surrounding this. Yeah, we can skip this slide. I'll show it in the live demo. Right. So now you can configure, instead of say, I want to delete this app outright, I want to put it into a business process. I want to first notify, let's say, the maker of the app or the owner of the app, and I want to notify second time. And then if I don't get an engagement from the maker, I want to first quarantine the app for a month, and then I want to go full delete. Right? You don't have to take one action. You can just chain it as part of this admin V2, Power Platform admin V2 connector, which is also in public preview since Ignite. You can now consume all of what you see in Advisor and be able to create your own workflow surrounding that. Let me take the screen share and show all of this in action.
Yep, take it whenever you're ready, Sue.
Yes. All right, let me know when you guys, one of you please confirm if you're seeing my screen.
We can see it, Sid. Well, I see looks like Teams chat right now, but yes, I see.
Yes, awesome. All right, so now we know that a lot of you do not stay on the PPAC, on the admin center day in and out, but you are mostly in Teams for most part of the day. So if there are any top recommendations, we are going to push those recommendations. We're going to alert you for those recommendations, not daily. Right now it's weekly. So weekly, we'll suggest what are the 2 most important recommendations for you within Teams. You can start your journey from there, or if you're already in the admin center, you will see this card on the home page. And if you miss this card, if for some reason you have customized this dashboard in a different way where you don't see the card, you can always add the card back, or you can also get to the Advisor from the Advisor item on the left nav and get to this dedicated Advisor page where you see all the recommendations. Right now, in this particular tenant, I have few recommendations based on how the assets are being consumed. As I mentioned earlier, so there is this information and the insights. So here I see that there are 18 apps in the tenant do not have valid owners. Now I click on this, we'll not just tell that there are 18 apps, we'll show what are the exact apps across the tenant. So this is not, you don't have to hop between one environment to another environment. It's one flat view, you can see this. Now, if you're coming in as an environment admin where you do not have access to one of the environments, then you don't see those. So as it is still bound by the user permissions. So if, as an environment admin, I come in, I'm going to see the recommendations that are appropriate for me. As a Power Platform admin, I come in, I'm going to see the tenant ID. Now I can see these apps here. I can select the app and I can immediately take an action, right? So how cool is that? So now I see that, OK, I have this app. I can see these are the co-owners. I'm going to select one of these persons, and then I can assign the app. Or if I feel that this app is no longer required, I can just go ahead and delete the app. I'm not going to do either of those right now. Or I can, if I want to consult it, I'm going to consult it somebody else. In this case, we also tell you who you should be probably be consulting, right? So in this case, we'll say, hey, these are the co-owners for this app. So maybe you want to consult with one of these people. I can just say that, and I can provide my custom message, and I can send it in Teams. In which case it will come into my Teams as a card, which is going to give me direct access back into my Maker portal. If I have access in the admin center, I can go to the admin center as well. Now, switching gears. So let's go into how the process looks like for if you want to automate this. So this is still manual. So every day I do not want to go into the admin center to see which are the new recommendations I have, or what are the new assets that were identified by my recommendations. So what I want to do is I want to create my automations on top of everything that I see in Advisor. So I can now use the power of all the connectors we have in the Power Platform, in addition to this Power Platform Admin V2 connector, and then I can create my workflow. So here I say I want to get ownerless apps. Or rather, let's test this one. Since we haven't talked Copilots much in this session so far. All right, so what does Copilot say here? So it says, let me zoom in a bit. It identifies the ownerless apps in Power Platform tenant. So it'll give you that. The Copilot is still learning, and sends a chat message to the co-owners of those apps and informs them that they will be the new co-owner. That's exactly what this flow does. So what this does is I'm looking at iterating through all the apps in that particular recommendation and identifying the user profile using the Office 365 connector, and using a Teams connector, I'm sending a card. Right? Now I can expand that. I can make it my own that fits my business process, whatever my COA recommends. Right? Now, finally, we have now I have a few questions. I'll see if can I push polls? Let's see. Since we are living dangerously, let's try polls also. Let me launch a poll. If you guys cannot respond, that's fine. We'll figure out some other way.
I think you should be able to, Sid.
Yeah, so I just launched a poll. So you should see a question asking what type of recommendation. So this is currently in public preview. So first, please give it a try. Share feedback. Feedback is very important. But also more importantly, as we add more recommendations, I want to understand what are the recommendations that are more valuable from your point of view. Selection, multi-selection, so you can choose all that is applicable for you. We'll give a few more seconds before I switch to the next poll. One last question before I hand it back to you, Ken. OK, that poll is still active. So let me launch the second one, and then you can start taking the screen back, Ken, screen share. So the second question is about the visibility of the recommendation itself. So right now I have shown multiple ways you can get to the recommendation. One is on the Teams as a pushed card every week, telling you what are the top 2 recommendations. The other one is on the Power Platform Admin Center dashboard. And the third one is the dedicated advisor page. But I want to get from you, what is, in your opinion, the best way to see the recommendation? Is it the advisor page? Is it in a contextual experience where you are somewhere else in the admin center, you see the recommendations there, or you want to see the recommendations somewhere else? With that, please feel free to keep answering this question in the chat. I'll give it back to you, Ken.
Thank you very much, Sid. Greatly appreciated. Wendy, I'm going to guess you are the person that's taking control.
I am.
We are going to talk about supporting the platform at scale.
Yes, so thanks. And just because Ken introduced himself at the beginning, I am also one of those former customers who joined Microsoft. So I'm going to talk a little bit about not just how you can do your support strategy at scale, but also how do all of these features you just heard maybe change or augment or benefit your support strategy as well. Because really it's a holistic picture, right? It's what's happening inside of the product as well as what is happening inside of your business processes and your support models and how you're thinking of that. So we've heard about this a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of nuance here. We've heard about the 3 recommended support models, or support models we often see most commonly with the Power Platform. And the first is that centralized support model. This is well represented in our docs, but really this is the concept of IT manages everything. It manages access to the environments themselves. It manages access to the data. And because it has that responsibility, it's actually the one building all of the applications. Now, ultimately, while that they can ensure you have the tightest control, you're ensuring that you're following formal ALM for every application inside of the platform, it does have some scalability limitations there. If you have the limited number of IT developers, and you can result in a backlog. Not necessarily a wrong way to do it, and if you're in a heavily regulated industry, I have seen some of that happen. But things like group and rules, it does help. It makes IT's life a little bit easier to push this out. But now we have additional support models that we can introduce, again, augmented with group and rules. And this is more of a business unit managed support. And so we'll often see this with environments that IT may be more of an enabler, but not necessarily authoring every single application. In fact, it's actually taking that out of solely IT's control and putting more of that responsibility, accountability, and support into the hands of the business units themselves. So IT is making applications for IT and streamlining business processes, which is helpful. But any of that work to streamline those business processes or create automation is really happening inside of those business units. So these are some of the greater scenarios, enabling certain scenarios where maybe some of your business units may be a little bit more mature or ready to have further adoption of the Power Platform than other business units. It's a great tactic. I've used some of this before to enable parts of the business to move faster than maybe other more regulated industries or parts of the business or parts that have sensitive data that might need a little bit more scrutiny. Now, with this, when we think about support, rather than IT supporting and developing these applications, the business units are developing that. They're managing the control to the environments, the access to the data, and the makers themselves are actually providing their own best effort support. Other than maybe a help desk providing some baseline, do you have access to the Power Platform, yes or no? The makers themselves are actually supporting their own application. And again, this can be more heavily supported with groups and rules. So you can have finance, dev, test, prod environments all grouped together under the purview of the finance team and setting up some of those business scenarios. The third model, as we see kind of in the evolution of the Power Platform that's often very popular, is our hybrid support model. And this is where, again, IT not only manages its own environment, it builds automation for IT and streamlines IT business processes, but it actually is managing any business use case that spans beyond an individual department use case. I was working with a customer the other day who had a use case of time cards and time tracking, and they have an employee-wide, company-wide policy. That would be a good example of applications that are across your entire company. IT would be managing those applications at scale in those use cases. And then each of the individual department level use cases would then be managed within those individual department controls or business unit controls. Now, this is very helpful. This is probably some of the most flexible models that there is. What I will call out is that this requires a bit more of a proactive approach. There's more preparation that's needed to ensure that this is successful. And I want to talk a little bit more about what that can look like for you. So as you think about your support strategy, the first thing I want to say is it really just takes a village. There's so many different components to support, and oftentimes we in IT get caught in this mindset of it's just IT doing all of the support, and that can be a little bit scary to launch a platform like the Power Platform at scale. But when you think about it, really your first gate should be, what can we automate? You have self-service processes. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about how Microsoft actually does all of this at scale. but we automate with Power Apps and Power Automate many of our own self-service processes. You can set up chatbots to answer questions, for example. Another thing, Ken and I and our friend Sean Feeney get to co-host the Power Platform podcast, The Low Code Approach. We were just interviewing a customer, and that episode will be dropping soon, where she was talking about how this customer was actually using Copilot to help answer questions and troubleshoot and things she would have formerly had to ask IT for help doing. She now can support herself, and as a maker, be a little bit more self-sufficient in helping her company. So once you get through the automated support, then you have more of an internal support layer. And what that allows you to do is, first of all, there's that team assisted support. So makers are supporting an application. There's best effort coverage. Maybe I have something within my department. We're covering for each other, and we're collaborating and our collective knowledge together, pooling that together to support our application. Beyond that, you can actually set up a community, so a success community of champions, and allow, whether through maybe a Teams channel or a Viva Engage channel, you can actually allow the community to support each other, community calls. And you'll be surprised how many people actually are passionate about this and love volunteering their time and knowledge. I've seen it at so many different customers at my former workplace, as well as now within Microsoft. So it's a great way of allowing the community to help themselves. As you grow in the adoption maturity, you actually have the ability to grow in a nurture team. And so you can actually set up a team whose responsibility is to nurture the community and nurture your skill set, as well as help desk for any initial troubleshooting, and then extending beyond, if your company needs help, to maybe partners, to Microsoft, or even our worldwide community. We have so many resources there for you. Let's talk very briefly then about what this looks like in the tooling. So Ken and Mick and Sid talked about environment routing. And really what that does is it enables your makers to then be routed to the appropriate environment. And we touched on this so briefly, but one of my favorite features in managed environments is the ability to have an in-product maker welcome message. I can't get over, as a former customer, how important this is to be able to prompt a user in the context of where they're working and get their attention. And so you have the ability to then put things like your policies in place, your company policies. This is where you can get ahead and communicate up front. Oh, you want to do this? There is a licensing requirement. Let's guide you to the right direction. Or here's our support expectations up front, so you don't go beyond that without making sure you have a support model in place. You then can also link to your request processes, which is a great place to be able to say if you need a different environment or need a different permissions, you have the ability to provide links to that policy, as well as links to educational resources. We have many resources available for free online and in the product. There's so many different influencers posting YouTube videos, as well as you can develop your own resources and even resources through Viva Learning. So all of this can be together. We've got different templates of things you can set up in terms of your hubs and landing page you could redirect people to, or you could put this within. And another thing I love is that you have the ability to customize this per environment. And so, so you have the ability to then be able to, so each business unit can customize their own policies and their own maker welcome message as well. So that just allows you within the product to start implementing and getting ahead and being more proactive on your support strategy. Moving on, because I know we're a little bit short on time here. Another concept as you think through your what your support model is, actually thinking through what is critical to support. And I know that's a bit of an odd switch. It seems like an odd switch talking to support, now talking about criticality. But the reason I say that is there's a really good matrix that I have listed on the screen that talks about not everything necessarily needs to have full support. Things that are highly critical, sensitive data, spans the entire company, a critical business impact, those things may need a more formal support model, and IT might need to take that into themselves. But things that are more business unit, it's important, but it's not going to harm the business drastically if there was a support issue, could be more in the team assisted support model or business unit model. And then things like personal productivity. scaling up your workforce may not need to be as highly supported or regulated as some of the other applications. This is really freeing because it allows you to be more flexible in how you're governing and how you're crafting your models using groups and rules, how you're supporting it so that you're more tightly regulating the things that need to be governed more tightly, and you're giving more freedom to the things with guardrails to the types of use cases that you can. Now, we do this here at Microsoft, so I wish I could spend a lot more time on this, but I will give a teaser. So as I mentioned, we co-host the Low Code Approach podcast. We actually recently interviewed Leanne Zelsman, who is one of the product owners for Power Apps for Microsoft internal employees. If you want a sense of our scale, I mean, we've got 50 to 60,000 active makers within our platform, 20,000 environments alone. So we are doing this at scale, hundreds of thousands of apps and flows within our tenant. So this is working for us, and Leanne does a really good job outlining this entire process in depth. I'll just kind of leave you with that model as you see on the right, where you can see how we're taking that criticality matrix and then putting it into these environments groupings. And Leanne has done some great work of calling out the investments that we're making into the platform and how we do that.
I'll add a short note about Leanne's podcast. You know, like Wendy, I've episode. Some folks have asked me, they met me in a conference or even dropped me a note on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, are those things scripted?" Okay, first
No.
off, we might send maybe 1 or 2 questions to the customers, but Wendy will attest to this. I never pay attention to any script or anything like that, and I will ask whatever the heck you all want me to ask to whoever's on the podcast. So what you're hearing from Leanne is 100% authentic, and this is how we actually manage the platform. It's a great episode.
And actually, that's a really good comment. Ken, maybe you could post the link to the form. We are taking input, so if there are questions you want answered, this is how we go a little bit deeper than a 1-hour session on a specific topic. And so maybe we could throw that in the chat and people could request those topics and submit feedback there. But absolutely, it's so unscripted. It's probably the most unofficial official podcast you'll get here at Microsoft. That we love to make sure we're representing your voice and getting you answers there. But yeah, I got to hear Leanne as a customer and speak to her directly when I was a customer, and this was an episode I wanted to have for a long time. So you'll see this in practice. I know we're coming short on time, and we do want time for Q&A, so I'm going to just wrap up with my last slide. And then if we need to come back to something, we absolutely can. And feel free to put those questions in the chat and we can stick around and answer those. One thing I'll say is this is a process. Not everything I covered, your groups and rules or things at scale, your support model, every piece of documentation or automation in place has to be put in place at the beginning. It's a maturity model. And so if you really think about where you are, I saw some people were brand new to the Power Platform. You're really on the initial stage, and that comes with its own types of support, really more maker support. There's a little more Wild West. There's not as much guidance, and this is why you're here, right? To start getting some control and growing in your maturity. But as you grow, then we're going to start developing a community, and we start developing these repeatable resources. You'll start to see patterns of the types of themes and questions, and even develop those best practices and start educating and operationalizing your help desk and educating your help desk on how to support the Power Platform. As you grow into a more capable stage, you may decide to have a dedicated support team of a developer, 2, 3, who have the ability to have some more time to be able to support these business units in their Power Platform endeavors, as well as to build solutions for IT. And I've seen that work very, very well within organizations, or even the usage of partners if need be there. Another thing is putting in your service level agreements. So how are you supporting it? Communicating that up front so you don't get blindsided down the road by a customer coming with a specific expectation that wasn't necessarily clearly communicated up front. And then finally, the last two, I'll skip ahead. You have your defined and efficient models. So efficient is where we're going, right? That's our North Star. everyone is clear on what the platform is, how it should be used. You're catching them in their process with these maker welcome messages. You're routing them the right place with your environment routing and group and rules, so that you're nudging through automation and education and communication the right usage of the Power Platform. And at that point, you're actually enabling innovation with guardrails, and that becomes a really freeing place to be as an organization. So I'll put up a couple different, looks like we accidentally bumped a couple slides to the end. I'll skip ahead. I'll put this on the page, and then we'll pause for questions if anyone has any questions. But we do have a lot of different resources for you that's available. And you can always hit us up on LinkedIn or listen to the podcast, give feedback if you'd like to learn more on a topic. But we'd love to hear from you, and please keep the feedback coming.
So as we jump into Q&A, or as my good friend Wendy says, as we begin to land the plane here, I have a question as I'm just going to post here inside of a poll. And if you'd like to know more, that's when I will give you my email. Right, so that is my teaser. So here is the question right here. It's been a very controversial topic over the years. So I am wondering, for the folks on the call today, given what you know about the platform and DLP, would you like to block all the connectors? Would you like that capability? And so I'm really curious. We've got 114 people on the call. I hope I get at least 100 answers inside of his, and you folks think about it, really. Right. So do we have questions in the chat? I think, Wendy, we had one earlier about.
Yeah, at the beginning, there was lots of questions around the developer environments. I think because people are new, we answered a lot of it in the chat, but just in case we missed it, could you just recap real fast on limits of how many developer environments can be created, and any licensing requirements that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I heard this word one time. I was like, is that really a word? An infinitesimal amount of developer environments can be created. So one, developer environments can do not count against your quota or anything like that within your particular tenant, right? Admins can still, of course, control the creation of them via a setting within Admin Center itself, right? And again, they do not require any licensing. They are free. They are 100% free. Now, with that said, the management at scale of said environments, developer environments, is a managed environments feature. So yes, you get to use all of the capabilities and things inside of there, but if you would like to manage and govern them as Mick illustrated with groups and rules, that for the time is a premium feature. So I hope that answers the question. And if we have more, please, come off of mute. I see one here from Noel. Noel, you're asking how many developer environments can you have in a tenant? So by default, when you request your first developer environment, you will get a viral allocation of 10,000 licenses, developer licenses in your tenant. Once you reach the end of that 10,000, right, you get another lapse, and then you reach the next one of that, and then so on, and then so forth, right? To my knowledge, we don't exactly have an exact limit upon them, right? But please know that we also have new features that allow you to have attestation for those environments as well. So if those environments are not being used, they can now be automatically deleted and rolled off and so on. Right. So there is, again, a lot of functionality. Oh, by the way, whoever said everything's going to managed environments, that attestation is not a managed environments feature right now. OK, so that's built in. That's a free thing. It absolutely works. OK.
Just one thing, Ken, I want to maybe use this opportunity to clarify the question. I think the poll was misinterpreted as if we're asking folks if they want to block literally all the connectors in one go. When I think the question is more just about having the flexibility to enable or block any one of your choice. So we have this concept of unblockable connectors today that you can't touch, can't do anything with it. So I think it's more about if we want to get rid of that concept, right, Ken?
Correct. Yes.
All right. So folks, I think folks can probably still update their answers in the poll, but we might see the numbers change with that clarification.
Thank you very much for that, Nick.
Of course.
There are tons of questions like polling in right now. I'm trying to keep up at the moment. Does a default DLP policy cover developer environments? Kristen Stanley, yes, it can do that if you choose to actually scope those environments into that particular policy. So yes, that is the answer to that, right? Please feel free, anyone else on the call, y'all jump in. I'm trying to read through the chat and catch up with everything.
There's a question again about the dev environments around I'm going to broaden the question a little bit to say about just increasing any capacity limits. My understanding is that it's a hard limit. You would need to promote it to another environment. Is that correct, Ken, or do we have the ability to extend?
That's a great question, Winnie. So that is correct, right? Like, keep in mind that the developer environments are really, meant for initial innovation, personal productivity, and things like that. They are free and limited in that fashion, right? But if we go back a few slides and show mixed environment strategy, maybe when you can pull that back up, that's where the features like pipelines start to come into play. So I can use pipelines in the developer environment to move things into, say, the production host that's on the right. But what's missing in here is that I don't need to have just one pipeline. I can have 5, 10, 100 pipelines inside of here, and then secure them and have approval processes and so on, such that in the development environment, I can move things through the admin configured pipeline host into, say, maybe a shared developer environment. So once I say that something has business value and I can prove it, and then I now want to promote this becomes part of my process. I say, okay, well, great. You just built something, show me the value of it. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Move it to this environment. Now you can do fusion teams and so on inside of there, right? And start growing that particular solution and extracting even more business value, adding on AI credits, adding more capacity for Dataverse, and so on, right? It's a gradual, again, process and whatnot in terms of the strategy and the processes for the customer.
I know we're at time. I want to call out one conversation's happening in chat, and then we can turn over Jeffrey and then stick around for any other questions. But Craig and Josh, I've seen your comments really about enabling, whether we should lock down it completely was kind of misunderstood a little bit, or whether we should enable. And I highly recommend Ryan Cunningham's episode on the podcast as he talks about this in depth. But really, you have multiple years of backlogs. Most organizations have so many years of backlog that IT has, and you're blocking innovation. So it's either being blocked or people are trying to find custom ways to do this. Excel spreadsheets, third-party shadow IT, for example. And what we're doing is we're allowing you to enable your people to solve problems, your own company's business processes. It's not like there are new processes being created. These are actually just being brought to light a little bit, bringing shadow IT to the light, bringing that within the Power Platform. And so I do appreciate the conversations that's been happening where you're allowing them to solve their problems in a secure way with guardrails and visibility so that you can address those as appropriate. But those problems, people are trying to solve problems any way they can. So providing a good way for them to solve it within the Power Platform is a great option for you. Jeffrey, I know that, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Wendy, sorry. No.
I was going to say, Jeffrey, I know I promised we turn it over to you on time, and then we can answer any other questions.
No, I think we're doing great. Wendy, Ken, Sid, Mick, thank you so much. It looks like there's quite a few folks still holding on, so I'll let the questions keep going if everybody wants to stick around, and then I'll make some quick announcements here at the end. But yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. I think we covered, I need to just double check and see if there's anything we missed. Mick, or nested environments groups within groups. Ken, Mick?
Yeah, I can maybe take that one, Ken, if you want. So
yeah, please take it.
Ken has been replying with working on it quite a few times, so I'll reply with that same question. For now, it's a flat list. It still gives you the possibility to obviously do things much more efficiently. But over time, I think we'll want to introduce that kind of hierarchy, and that will probably make it easier for you, for the Power Platform to resemble a little bit more like your organizational structure, right? So we can imagine that, you know, there are certain rules that perhaps get defined at like a higher level that trickles down. Other groups are then managed by other sets of users. So we're going to get there at some point, but for now, we are just starting with that more simple approach.
Yeah, I will say, in terms of hierarchy, we really want a lot of feedback for this one, right? Also, to further entice you all for maybe joining office hours, we do record every lab. They are under NDA, 100%. If you do not have an NDA, I'm not taking you, period. So just being honest, folks, we will vet you and look at your organization. But once you join office hours, we record every call. So if you want to look for a topic that we talked about, like Mick just alluded to, you can go back in time and look at those particular meetings and understand and get caught up and see everything that we've talked about thus far. So Jeff, sorry, I'm gonna go.
No, you're good.
Oh.
No, thanks again, everybody. The last couple things that I wanted to mention, outside of security and governance being a big topic that we've been hearing and gathering feedback on from our previous sessions, we're also clearly hearing everybody discussing some confusions around Copilot. So we've got another session for the Master Series scheduled next Wednesday. I'll drop the registration link here in the chat in just a second. And you guys are welcome to join that, and we're going to do what we can to demystify Copilot. And then the last event to mention, for any folks that happen to be in the Houston area or traveling to the area, April 11th, we will be doing our first hybrid event at the Houston MTC. So we'll have folks in the room presenting. A lunch will be included as well for anybody that happens to be on site. So I'll post both of those registration links here in just a moment. And yeah, Ken, hope to see you there. Come get a lunch. Thanks again, everybody.
Only if there's barbecue, Jeff.
Thanks, Al.
Noted.
Thanks, everyone.